Good morning. Thank you, Matthias, for such a great reading. So it was a late Thursday afternoon in organic chemistry lab. My lab partner, Brian, who's a good friend of mine now, and I were just sitting. And that's something that we did quite a bit of in organic chemistry lab. The labs take a long time because you're waiting on some product to form out of all the meticulous measurements that you've taken and combined. And so in this particular lab that day, we were testing all the melting points of various products that we created in the lab. But we didn't know what products, they were unknown products, and we were supposed to determine what they were based upon their melting points. Seems simple enough, right? Well, the way that we measured melting points was a mel-temp machine, and it looks a little bit like a microscope. So you put the product on the slide, and you're looking at it with, your eye is right up there, looking at it, waiting for the moment that it melts. You have to watch it. And so Brian volunteered to watch our product, and he was watching and watching and watching, and it was not melting. And it kept getting hotter and hotter. The machine, of course, it gets hotter and hotter. And I started to get a little bit worried about how high the temperature was going on the machine. I wondered if we had done something wrong in the creation of our product. And so I casually mentioned it to my professor, and she told us to turn it off immediately and step away from it. And basically, she said that we had created some kind of weird salt, and that we were dangerously close to the machine overheating, and there could have been some sort of mechanical or electrical failure with that machine overheating. And I don't know, I just felt like since Brian's eye was right there, it probably wasn't the best idea for us to continue going. And so the reason that she said we had created some kind of weird salt is because the melting temperature of salt is so high. It's actually 800.8 degrees Celsius. That is the melting point of salt. And its boiling point is even higher, 1,465 degrees. And so I'm grateful that we didn't find the melting point of the salt that we that we created that day, and somehow we still passed the lab. I think she was just being gracious to us. But anyway, who accidentally creates the salt? I don't know. I did. But what I don't think our professor intended us to learn that day, for us to learn that we did learn, was how cool salt is. And when Jesus says here in the Sermon on the Mount, which A.J. Levine calls Jesus' greatest hits, Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth. You are the salt of the earth. If salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? Now, isn't that exciting? Let's talk about salt just a little bit more. Rock salt scores a 1 on the MOH scale, which determines the hardness of a mineral. So it's this beautiful crystalline structure with cool crevices, salt is, but it's really soft. It's much softer than, say, a diamond or topaz. And we know salt, right? If we have chefs or bakers in the room, we need salt, right? We need it to flavor our food. But too much of it can raise the sodium in the bloodstream. It's tough on the kidneys to remove water. And if there's that extra fluid around, it can create more pressure on our vessels. However, we need salt for nutrition. We need it, our thyroids need it, and iodized salt. And salt was used to preserve foods for years and years and years and years until we got refrigeration. And we put it on our roads, a salt mixture, to help us Tennesseans drive a little bit better when we have inclement weather. And in the past, it was also used to heal wounds. So, suffice it to say, if I could be a mineral, I'd totally want to be salt, rather than, I don't know, a silly diamond or something like that. Salt is a very cool thing to be. And here's the thing, though, in this text, salt can't just unintentionally lose its flavor. The only way that salt loses its flavor is if it comes in contact with an external reagent, like it's being diluted with water, right? And I checked with my former biochemistry professor, the one that saved our lives. I checked with her this week. I emailed her. I said, hey, I haven't heard from you. We haven't talked in forever, but here's this verse that Jesus says. And I'm pretty sure that salt can actually expire. You know, it doesn't lose its saltiness. It'll just sit there for years. And she said, you know what, you're right. She said, my guess is that the salt that was used at the time had other things in it. So if it got wet and washed away, the white stuff left behind wasn't sodium chloride, but contaminants. And the other thing she said that could have happened is that if the salt had gotten wet, then it could have reacted with other contaminants and have lost its saltiness. Interesting. But the point is, salt doesn't lose its flavor unless something dilutes it. And I think that's so interesting. And then Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to God in heaven. So let's talk about light. Light of the world. Let's talk about light. Light is, when we say light, we're usually talking about the visible light spectrum, or the light that we can see with our human eyes. We receive our light from the earth, to the earth from the sun, and it helps us develop vitamin D. It keeps us warm. It helps plants convert through photosynthesis, essentially, to create from sunlight and some other things. It creates glucose for the plant. Marine biologists have discovered that some creatures live on the bottom of the sea who don't need light unless they don't have eyes. But with the exception of these cool creatures, we need light for the most part in the world. And one really cool thing is we don't generate our own light, but some creatures can, and it's called bioluminescence. Very cool. Light is pretty cool, and we have to have it to live. Stay lit and be salty, Jesus says. And I mean that in the best way. I wouldn't appreciate any salty emails after this sermon. No. But let's not lose the context of this passage. Today we're in Matthew 5, and that comes right on the heels of the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, which Pastor Paul preached on last week, or the Beatitudes, we know them as. And directly prior to Jesus delivering the Beatitudes, Jesus was doing some cool stuff. In Matthew 4, we read, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. So his fame spread throughout all of Syria. And they brought him all the sick, those who were afflicted with various diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, and paralytics, and he cured them. And the great crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. And then Matthew says this, when Jesus saw the crowds, i.e., when Jesus saw these suffering crowds, he went up to the mountain and delivered the Sermon on the Mount, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. We know this. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness or justice, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful. They are the ones who will receive mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they are the ones who will get to see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That was said in response to the suffering crowds. When Jesus saw the crowds of the sick and afflicted, he began the Sermon on the Mount and said, blessed are y'all. Jesus isn't glorifying illness here. Likely these folks were on the margins of society and had little means of health care or communal support. But what he is saying is, I see you all. I see your suffering, and I hate this for you, and you aren't alone. A couple chapters later in Matthew, a very similar passage says that Jesus had compassion on the crowd because their illnesses and because they didn't know God. And that word compassion, it's really not a strong enough word. In the Greek, it means his viscera, his insides ached for these people because they were ill, because they were sick, and they didn't know God. That is the kind of compassion and love that Jesus has. And I think that was the impetus for the Sermon on the Mount. And our salt and light passage is within the context of the Sermon on the Mount. It just comes a little bit after the Beatitudes. Essentially, I think Jesus is saying, "Blessed are you who are broken, for yours is the kingdom." And maybe we think we have to have all of our ducks in a row to be loved or to follow Jesus. But we don't. You don't have to have it all together to be salty and bright. You don't have to be perfect. And in fact, there's nothing you can do to separate yourself from the love of God. Your bank account does not determine who you are. Your medical diagnosis does not determine who you are. Your body image doesn't determine who you are. Your successes and your failures do not determine who you are. As a matter of fact, blessed are you who are broken. Blessed are the broken, because the broken will see God in a way that people who need nothing will never see God. You are the beloved of God. And when I read these scriptures, the salt and light text in tandem with the Beatitudes and Matthew 4, I can't help but wondering this. What dilutes us? What dilutes you? What hides you? What bushel baskets are covering your light? Is it because we don't think we're good enough to be salt and light? As if there's a prerequisite. We need a resume to be salt and light. I think shame can be a pretty effective bushel basket and diluter. One shaming thought can creep into our psyche and let us believe this: I'm not worthy of love. I don't belong here. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm a mistake. I'm not worth being known. I don't matter. I'm ugly. I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. I am the summation of the pain that I feel. I'm just not good enough. I can't be forgiven because I'm just a really bad person. What often covers our light and what often dilutes us is shame in our own minds. But Jesus says, you are loved, and you are the light of the world, as we are. Don't hide underneath a bushel basket. Do not hide under shame. And salt cannot lose its saltiness unless it's deliberately diluted. Don't dilute yourself. Don't dilute how very loved you are. Don't dilute the power of love in this world. Don't try to make yourself smaller. Be you. We need you. Stay lit and be salty, Jesus says. Be excellent salt. Howard Thurman, we read through a Thurman book earlier this year. He was a mystic and theologian, maybe most known for this phrase, although the whole corpus of his writings are just outstanding. He said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And along those same lines, St. Irenaeus said, the glory of God is a human fully alive. So please, please, please be no less than who you are. Don't hide, don't dilute. Be who you were created to be. Blessed are you, you salty, bright people. Blessed are you who will not hide anymore. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. You. Amen.